This is John from Austin, and he's on line 1. Hi, John.
Hello.
How are you doing?
How are you?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. There's been several comments made. I can't even really remember all of them now, but there were some interesting things said about the first thing to be agreeable. I have a lot of problems with the abuse of children, in particular, in fundamentalist families and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced a little bit of that myself as a child, and so I identify with that, and I think that's true. But we're mainly talking about the hellfire brimstone, firestone brimstone bullshit and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some generalizations have been made that I would like to address, and I see this happen on this show a lot. I mean, one minute it's like, we understand that all theists, are different, and they have the progressive side and the traditionalist stagnant side and even the regressive side.
And then they just split them all anyway. Yeah.
It's like you really want to go back and keep the argument in terms of the Scopes monkey trial, and you don't just speak from the antiquated religious viewpoint, but also from an antiquated scientific viewpoint. We can stick everything if you can't stick something in a test tube and shake it up and put a number on it, then it doesn't exist. And that's not really what's
simplification,
going on in science today.
No.
And so
how do you mean?
I have a problem with that. I find the entire argument of the existence of God to be mostly semantical, because the word God is so ill-defined. And I think, real quickly, I'll finish. What is said among believers, even moderate Christian believers, as far as they go and they pretend as if they support the old interpretations of the Bible, but I think there's a lot more going. I think there's a lot more secretive open-mindedness going on in religion. I think people have evolved to.
Can you give an example of this?
What people have evolved?
No, I mean this was an example of this secretive open-mindedness. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that.
Well, I know a lot of different types of people, and I know some religious people, and if you really talk to them, you'll find out, they don't think God is a little old man that lives in the sky, and they don't really believe anymore. They're questioning the whole justice of the eternal hell. Mm-hmm. Some are even questioning afterlife in general. Is that really that important? Mm-hmm. And really is what the message is about is the earth and what we're going through here, this life that we're going through now, obviously.
Okay, well, I think I see what you mean there, and all of this is sort of by way of pointing out that we make too many unfair generalizations on the show. Is that sort of what you're getting at? Because here's...
I really believe there's a lot of heavy generalization going on. Like Tracie said something about religion in general has this idea of disdain for humanity, and
well, I think that's true. And when we talk about, for example, doctrines and beliefs and ideas that religions have, we are maybe not necessarily saying all of the religious believers out there subscribe to those, but at the same time, a couple of points that I like to make. First off is that I would suggest that theism in all its forms, even the most open-minded, progressive, what have you, still has at its root an unproven assertion, which is that there is some sort of sentient being, so whether you think of him as an old man with a beard or the Force or midichlorians or whatever they are, there's some sort of sentient, causative, intelligent entity out there that made us and made all of it. Just intelligent thinking, having ideas, acting upon that.
Just pre-qualifications of one intelligent being. Okay.
Yeah, or several if you're polytheistic, and so this is just a fundamental, unproven claim that is at the root of any theistic religion, and so that right there, whether you at that point become some, a bomb-throwing fundamentalist wacko or just a very nice even-tempered and tolerance moderate, you still have that particular set of ideas
Right.
at the root of your thinking.
And
that's what
generally,
needs to
only
be
through that filter does
Yeah.
humanity matter.
And yeah, and so
No,
it's
I
true
don't
that
agree with that.
I do.
Yeah.
Only through that filter of humanity matters.
well,
That doesn't even make sense to me.
Christianity has a doctrine of salvation. What is the purpose of what do I need saving from if humanity matters on humanity's terms? What am I being saved from?
Well, we're saved from ourselves.
Okay, that's my point. That's my point. They're offering me salvation from my being human. I don't need to be saved from being human. That's a dehumanizing doctrine.
do you see what I mean?
Go ahead. Is he on? Wait, was it?
You have to hit the one.
Which one was it, John? Okay, John. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're back. Sorry. We just
Not
needed
necessarily-
to. We just kind of. Tracie needed to make her point there, and too much crosstalk kind of is a little confusing.
Yeah,
Right?
telling me that I need to be saved because I'm a human being, and that human beings require some sort of external salvation because being a human being is not good or not good enough, is dehumanizing. That's the very definition of dehumanizing.
This idea that by simple virtue of being born and existing at all, we need saving.
Yeah,
because we are
you're
innately
saying something's
corrupted.
wrong with me, and there's not. I'm human, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with being
I
human.
got you. I got you. Can I make a point?
Sure.
Okay. Salvation itself is undefined here because if you're talking about, once again, the salvation from eternal torment and God is this this masochistic master
doesn't have to be hell.
who's going to torture you for eternity.
Not what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
hang on.
that's bullshit, and you don't need salvation from that. But we're improving. As a race, there's lots of kinds of evolution going on. There's intellectual evolution, technological, I believe spiritual, and moral
Whatever that means.
evolution is going on. And I believe that we have evidence of this everywhere. If you look at the governments of today, as messed up as some of them are, and I mean, they used to burn people at the stake, and it used to be a public event.
And the point is,
that doesn't happen in the U.S. anymore, anyway, and it doesn't happen in most countries anymore, anyway.
because people figured it out.
Yeah, I would suggest that.
That's what I mean, and that's what we've been saved from.
No, it's not.
No, let me tell you what's done the saving here, because I think I know what you're getting at in a general term. Are these ideas that you bring up are part of what is known as a cultural enlightenment? It is a period in our history, especially in the history of Western civilization, known as the Enlightenment, and this was a period when secular ideas, non-religious ideas that were not tied to the idea of a god, a deity, this sort of punishing father figure, these ideas began to be pushed to the back burner, and things like human rights, like the idea of the dignity of the human being as an individual, began to have more and more influence in our culture. So yes, we don't burn people at the stake anymore because secular ideas made it clear that was an abominable thing to do.
Yeah.
When you had very strong religious cultures, you saw that sort of thing, just as you saw justification for slavery. It is because of non-religious ideas that we see these kinds of intellectual evolution that you're talking about, this idea of egalitarianism between the genders and the races and what have you. Or racism these are ideas that are being fought not because of anything having to do with belief in a god or a deity.
But there's a greater point.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't see where I'm going at all.
That's true. We don't.
I would say an argument to that it's not only religious systems that burn people at the stake and hung people. It's also political system. It's war systems. It's economic systems. So it's not only religious systems.
Agreed.
To blame religion is for all the ills of the earth.
Nobody has.
There's another generalization that I hear going on here.
But no, we're not doing that.
Never done that.
We're not doing that.
We have never done that.
We're saying
you are.
No, we're not.
saying that
Not right now.
No, we never have.
When you had some dumbass on the line who was talking about dinosaurs on a fucking yacht, then
I think we're done with you, dude.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you know how to make your point, because we've been sitting there for several minutes online and you never really got to a point. If your idea is that we make broad generalizations, look, we're atheists, okay? And this is an atheism show, and we critique religion on this program. And we do hold religion responsible for the things that it does. Now, if you want us in every single phone conversation that we have to split hairs and be like, okay, well, we're not talking about this and we're not talking about that. No, to hold religion responsible for the things that it does specifically is not this unfair generalization. And yes, while there are cultures, there are political systems that have been corrupt and that have been dehumanizing, that have done many of these bad things, to sit there and claim that religion has not had, or that there's too much of an emphasis on religion, when we simply blame religion for its role in those same activities.
Right.
You know, you are what is known as, Jeff Dee's wife has a wonderful term for guys like you, and it's called ignore stick, right? You're somebody who just wants to whitewash and downplay the role of one thing over another thing. You just don't want to really think about the ramifications too much. You want to give religion a fair shake that it doesn't deserve by saying, oh, well, it's not necessarily any worse than these other things. Well, it has been worse, right?
Well, it fuels a lot of those
most of the great atrocities that go on in this world have a religious motivation behind them, right? Not all of them, no. We'll admit that straight up front. But I think that if you look at, 9/11, it took fundamentalist Islam to motivate that. Most of the, let's say the overwhelming majority of the anti-Semitism that you see in the modern world had its roots in medieval religious culture, right? Look at the history of, the Middle Ages, particularly, say, during the time of something like the Black Death, right? Where one of the reasons that people latched onto for why the Black Death, the plague, was ravaging the landscape was that Jews were poisoning wells, right? And you would have entire towns where they would take the entire Jewish population of the town, herd them into barns, and set the barn on fire, right? And these were good Christians doing these things. So to say that, oh, well, you can't just blame religion for stuff, that's a gross generalization. A lot of what you see, most of the atrocities, I think, are attributable to religion. Most of the atrocities that have influenced non-religious systems that commit the same atrocities, those non-religious systems were influenced by these ideas that came before that had a root in religion. I think religion plays a very strong role, and a much stronger role than most other things. So... yeah. And I'm not going to shut up about that.
We have people up for stoning in Iran right now.
Yeah.
We've got Uganda passing laws to want to kill or imprison gays for life. This is now. This isn't like 100 years ago or 500 years ago or in some antiquity. This is in today's world right now, religion at the root.
Yeah.
People dying, people being executed in gruesome ways because of religious belief. And Christians in Uganda and Muslims in Iran. And so nobody gets the pass. But I wanted to clarify, when I was talking about salvation being dehumanizing, I don't just mean if you believe in a hell. Even if you don't believe in a hell, the central tenet of Christianity is that Jesus Christ was put to death as a human sacrifice for the redemption of mankind's deprivation. And as long as a person accepts that that act took place and was just, they're saying that an execution was required to make things right for me with God. So the idea is that whatever I did, whatever I'm guilty of, required an execution for recompense. Whether I would go to hell or not go to hell is irrelevant. It is dehumanizing to say that a human being should be killed for being a human being, but luckily Jesus was killed instead, so now we don't have to be. Regardless of whether you think after I die, I just die, after I die, I go to hell, I go to purgatory, whatever you dream, it doesn't matter. The central tenet of salvation is based on an execution human sacrifice, a blood sacrifice that was required, supposedly by this Christian God, in order to atone for people being people. That's dehumanizing.